Hi, and welcome to the show today. I'm Dr. Kelly Victory, filling in for Dr. Drew, who's busy with some other items today. I'm always thrilled to be on this platform and able to have open, honest discussions with our guests, and many of whom are my colleagues in medicine. Before I introduce my guest today, who is Dr. Alejandro Diaz, it's been a while since I've been on the show, and a lot has happened. Goodness, the first month and a half, whatever it is, of President Trump's new administration has been pretty exciting to watch. I certainly get up every day and turn on the news to see what has happened, over the last 24 hours. And somebody said to me just recently that what's going on with this whole Doge thing is really more theater, that, even if Elon Musk, rids or exposes, hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud and corruption, it's only a drop in the bucket. But it seems to me that it even if it is symbolic, it's a pretty important symbolic measure because it is sort of sending the shot across the bow, if you will, that this new administration is not interested in funding fraud. They're not going to continue with the insanity that we've been exposed to. And certainly the COVID insanity was part of that. Robert Kennedy Jr., I'm thrilled to say, was obviously confirmed. He's been busy putting out fires that the left keep throwing his way. And certainly Dr. Diaz and I'm sure we'll get into that. That's everything from measles and bird flu to, whatever crisis du jour they want to wamp up. So we're going to talk about that. So when I come back, I will formally introduce Dr. Diaz, my guest for today. We're going to talk about certainly a little bit about COVID, but more about the more recent issues with the measles outbreak, the bird flu issues, and how that's being once again mismanaged by the people in authority, and talk a little bit about just sort of medicine and healthcare in general and where we see that going. So after this break, I'll be back with Dr. Diaz.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15.
Welcome back. I thought I took a lot of supplements, and I do. I take a pile of them, but I'm not sure that I've got Drew beaten. He takes more supplements, I think, than I do. I'm going to have to try that fatty. I think I need to get, I just one more I need to get on. Anyway, I'm super excited to introduce my guest today, Dr. Alejandro Diaz. Dr. Diaz is a pediatric allergist and immunologist with more than 30 years of clinical experience. He and I got to know each other really at the beginning of the pandemic and have worked together quite a bit since then. In addition to being an expert in pediatrics, he's an expert in biosecurity and in migration. He's been involved in the complex medical screenings required for migration. He's spoken at multiple countries. He's at the parliaments in dozens of countries. He's spoken at the White House. He's been a trusted advisor on issues related to biosecurity and to migration. He certainly, like me, was one of the early people sounding the alarm and raising the alarm flag with regard to the mRNA vaccines, quote unquote, for COVID. I certainly saw the other fallacies with regard to the COVID pandemic. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And he currently is working along with myself and with Dr. Drew at the Wellness Company. Dr. Diaz is the chief of pediatric medicine at the Wellness Company now, and we are certainly thrilled to have him there. He's been a great addition to our team. So without further ado, Dr. Diaz, so happy to have you here. I'm excited.
I'm very excited. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate people can see that you've got a stethoscope around your neck. We are pulling you out of your very, very busy allergy immunology clinic, and I so appreciate it. I know that you've carved this time out, so we'll try to definitely make the best of it. I've got lots I want to talk with you about. As I mentioned just in the introduction, you and I got to know each other really because of the COVID pandemic. We were very much singing from the same song sheet, if you will, with regard to everything from concerns about the mRNA to the lockdown and the harms happening to children. But I don't want to spend much of this hour talking about COVID. I think many people, including I, am sort of have COVID fatigue. But that said, you do bring a different lens to this. And I'd like you to spend a couple of minutes laying out from your perspective, from your purview, what it was like at the beginning as a pediatrician, as an immunologist, as a Latino, what are the sorts of things really, because you do have a different viewpoint of it or had a different perspective at the beginning, and what sort of led you to know early on that something was amiss?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Victory, to having me on your show and Dr. Drew's show. It's an honor for me. Thank you for the opportunity. And let me just tell you my story. How did I started with understanding the COVID operation? I don't call it pandemic. It was a COVID operation. And everything actually started a year before. So I was in Mexico. And I was interviewed by a very important broadcaster in Mexico. And he asked me about, because of my background as an immigration doctor, he asked me about what did I think about the migrant caravans, the caravans that they were gathering in Honduras. And I told him, this is my position about that, being an immigration doctor, a panel physician for many years. But what really worries me is that looking at the geopolitical aspect and what's happening at the global arena, I really think we are on the preface of a global pandemic. And he says, what are you talking about? And I was really looking at that. And look what happened just 11 months after my prediction on the third week of October 2018. And then right after that, I start to receive a lot of calls and interviews, national and international, because of my prediction. But basically, I didn't know it was going to be a coronavirus. I didn't know it was going to be a virus or a bacteria or a parasite or anything else. I just knew that it was something so hot that it was coming in a way of a pandemic. And then the COVID the COVID operation happened. So that's my story with the COVID operation. And then obviously as a pediatrician, allergist, immunologist, it was very hard. It was very hard for me to try to because that was on the verge of the one of the worst pandemics ever in the history of humanity. So it was very hard to communicate that not only with my patients and relatives and my family, but also with my colleagues. So it was very, very difficult. But after 5 years of that, we're still here. We've been talking about different scenarios, different important venues, and just putting the conversation on the table.
Well, as you refer to it as an operation rather than just a pandemic, explain a little further what you mean. Why do you call it the COVID operation?
Well, first of all, I like to say to your audience, your great audience, that I'm just a regular guy. I'm a regular guy. I don't have extra sources of information, just like anybody else, just what is there. But I think I have this sixth sense of understanding what's going on in the world. And I have no doubt in my mind, and I've been telling this publicly everywhere, at the Romanian parliament, at the Mexican parliament, at CPAC, the Japanese parliament, in India, I just came back from India, you name it. This was 100% man-made. It was a evil agenda to do as much harm as they could. And look what happened. The narrative of fear, the agenda of fear, mass formation, and things that, it really changed the world.
Amen. And that's why we have to get that on the table. We have to talk openly and honestly about that. That is not a conspiracy theory any longer. The things that you and I were derided for, lambasted for, censored, threatened, ridiculed, they have all come to be proven now. Everything from the fallacy of wearing masks to the fallacy of asymptomatic spread, and then certainly the, safety and efficacy of the quote mRNA vaccines. We know that the harms have been tremendous. I said from the beginning, and it still really pains me, the damage that was done to children of all of the groups who really suffered because of this pandemic or this incident, this operation, if you want to call it. We're children. And certainly I think it will take decades for us to really understand just how much damage was done. And by that, I don't just mean by the mRNA shots. I mean by the whole thing, the lockdowns, the mask wearing, the social isolation, all of those things. Talk a little bit about, you see children every day. You're a very busy clinician. What sorts of things are you seeing today that you would say are potentially related to what happened during the 5-year COVID debacle?
One of the main things that I would like to mention is that the mental health issue. The aftermath of that social distancing and lockdowns and masks, we just cannot even dimension the level of harm at the mental health state in these beautiful children worldwide.
Right.
We are just watching the tip of the iceberg, Dr. Victory. This is just the tip of the iceberg on all aspects, starting with the mental health, coming back to the immune system. So I speak regularly about the hygiene hypothesis. So everything, we got kind of sterile. There's no more antibodies. There was no more nothing to fight about, and our immune system got weakened and weakened lately. This is why we are seeing a lot of infections, common colds lasting for 3-4 months, a lot of people coughing everywhere, and this is just the side effect of those insane measures that many governments took worldwide.
Exactly. And so, when you and I talk about this damage done to the immune system, I don't mean just by the mRNA shots, and they certainly did. And we could do an entire show on the ill effects of the mRNA shots. But it's things like locking people indoors, limited exposure to natural sunlight, limited exposure to other pathogens. We were not meant to bathe in Purell and stay in a bubble and not be exposed to things, because it does damage your immune system. Not having regular exercise. It turns out when you close the parks and the swimming pool and the beaches, people don't get out. They didn't exercise. People's diets went to hell during the pandemic. Everyone's ordering DoorDash and eating pizza and Pringles and sitting on the sofa. So it was and let us not forget, overwhelming stress, the impact that stress has, which includes the stress imposed by social isolation. All of these things together, I think, really have damaged people's immune system. And when you look at the incidence right now, and you see it, I'm sure, every day, of respiratory illnesses, the influenza cases this year, lots of things. We have seen a lot of disease burden, infectious disease burden, independent of the things we're about to start talking about with regard to measles and bird flu. So people are going into this with weakened immune systems. Let's talk about bird flu.
Dr. Victor, I would like to add something about that, because I really think it's very interesting, extremely interesting. On the side of the medical aspect, which is very important for us, it was something even deeper than that. This is why I call it the evil agenda. Mm-hmm. The COVID operation hit the three main pillars of society: faith, family, and health. Mm-hmm. And we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg, because it hits at the moral and spiritual level, and obviously at the health level. So this was tremendous. It was insane. It's hard to understand the level of sickness of whoever or the crew who created this.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about this, because I agree with you. I don't think there's anything probably more important than the effect that pandemic and the response had on those three pillars. When you talk about faith, remember, churches were shut down. Walmart was open. Churches were shut down. Liquor stores were open. Marijuana stores were open, but you couldn't go to church. You couldn't gather and worship. And this included over major holidays. Families could not get together for holidays. You couldn't go to a wedding or a funeral or celebrate a graduation. It drove a wedge through. I know that when you ask people, do you have, were there friendships that you lost? Or family members that, relationships that were, cloven in half as a result of what happened during the pandemic. I know it certainly happened for me. I have friends and family members with whom I've never really had the same relationship since the great divide over COVID. You either believed in masks or you didn't. You either believed in the vaccines or you didn't. And it was as polarizing as anything I've ever seen.
Dr. Victory, exactly that. But on top of that, just imagine in a very, this beautiful mind of children, pornography went to the roof.
Oh, yeah.
Went crazy up like never before. So just combined everything, and it was a time bomb.
Do you see, you have a different lens. I am only here in the United States, and although I have colleagues around the world, I don't see, you have traveled to so many different places. You just rattled off a handful of different countries you've been to in the last 6 months. Are you seeing these same sorts of things in children in other countries, in India and Mexico and Romania and the UK?
Exactly the same. The playbook was so well written. It was so well scripted that it was developed to affect the planet. Mm-hmm. They did a great job. They were successful.
They were. And so, this is a good segue. Now, you and I both see it. I've talked about it for the better part of 5 years. So have you. You're prolific on Substack. You do lots of interviews. You and I are constantly trying to educate the public about what actually happened in an honest and open way. Here we go. Fast forward. Let's talk about, bird flu, the next one. Don't you think there are an awful lot of similarities in terms of the way that they are, once again, it's the fear porn, the panic, we have to, kill all the birds, we've got to cull the flocks. They are doing things that are nonsensical in my estimation, from a scientific perspective. Do you agree with that?
100%. And the fact of the matter that they know that people, we are experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome, and now they know they are just a second away to get on again with the same narrative. So that's why they're creating the bird flu, and now with measles and everything else. So, because they know that people, they're very scared, and they don't want to go by that, ever again. And this is why they're bringing this craziness to the world again.
Yeah, to be clear, you and I know this, but for our audience, bird flu, specifically we're talking about H5N1, has never been a significant risk to humans. It has only posed a risk previously to people who are in direct contact with infected birds or infected cattle. There has not been a single case of human-to-human transmission of bird flu in the United States. Okay? All of that said, a couple things. Number one, we know that they are doing gain-of-function research on this virus in labs in the United States with the stated purpose of making it more transmissible human to human. Let's talk about that and gain of function. But also, they are doing things in terms, supposedly in the name of safety. And this is what harkens back to me. It's right out of the COVID playbook. It's all about safety, right? So, during COVID, it was masking and lockdowns and shutting down the schools and all of this insanity. Now it's killing millions of poultry birds, shutting down farms, making them, destroy all the eggs and remain closed for a matter of months. I mean, there's nothing scientific about this.
100%. And the most, dangerous part of this is that, unfortunately, it's the same playbook, exactly the same playbook. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm not trying to predict anything, but I wouldn't be surprised that in the near future, we will have human-to-human transmission. I wouldn't be surprised because they're trying to use exactly the same playbook.
And so I guess here's the question, as an immunologist, you probably have better scientific background in this. As I mentioned, that we know they're doing gain-of-function research on this virus, including at places like the USDA lab in Athens, Georgia,
Correct.
And in multiple academic laboratories, including the University of Wisconsin in Madison. They are manipulating H5N1 bird flu in the laboratory to try to make it more transmissible. We are seeing some indication of some more virulent strains of it. We've had a few people who have supposedly died with bird flu. And the question is that by natural mutation? You and I talked with Dr. Peter McCullough about this. Is it natural mutation, or is this once again because they manipulated this virus in a laboratory?
Yes, and especially with the new variant, the D1.1, I really think that it's nothing else that gain of function research, and they're playing with they're doing the same playbook, and unfortunately, society will pay the price until we do something. And this is why I love this kind of shows, Dr. Victory, because we are bringing hope to the people. We don't have to panic. We don't have to do anything. We just have to be aware. We just have to stand out there and then just try to have better nutrition, better supplementation, better health overall. That's basically the main message.
Absolutely. I don't think that it's likely that the new variant that's causing more severe disease for bird flu, I think it's unlikely that it occurred by natural mutation. I think it likely was the result of lab manipulation. I didn't agree with much that happened during the Obama administration, but I did agree with the moratorium that was placed in 2014 on gain of function. It's very dangerous. You and I both know lab errors, mistakes aren't uncommon. It happens all the time. Lab leaks happen. So even if you wanted to say, hey, what happened in Wuhan with, COVID, it, wasn't released on purpose. It was just abject incompetence. Even if it was that, it's dangerous. I think it was, as you do, something more nefarious. And why in the world would you want to manipulate H5N1 bird flu to make it more transmissible human to human? Why would somebody do that? It didn't pose a risk to humans before. Why would somebody do that? Did you have a theory?
Exactly. Well, the only reason for that hypothesis is that to follow the same narrative as what happened with the COVID operation, and if you remember, Dr. Victory, the first official case of SARS-CoV-2 was just about December 19, 2019 in China. But like 6 months before, we were seeing cases in Italy of COVID-19, but it wasn't labeled at that time. But we know that it was there. So they're very clever. They know how to do it, and they just start here's and there's until they have the whole narrative, and then they just put it out there. It's incredible how it works. It's incredible.
And you just mentioned, the most obvious thing, and I don't want to gloss over it, which is, once again, just as with COVID, none of the people in the positions of public health are talking at this point about the things that we should be doing to be good stewards of our overall immune health. No one is talking about good nutrition, regular exercise, adequate sleep, stress mitigation. It's all, wait, and if we're lucky, they'll come out with a new vaccine for bird flu, or, they'll kill all the birds and we can somehow eradicate it. You as a pediatrician, what are the things that you are telling your patients? How do you coach your patients clinically on a daily basis so that they have something other than, bathing in Purell and waiting for a vaccine?
Yes, well, at this point in time, it's kind of hard to communicate this kind of messaging to our patients, because they are so hurt for what happened with the pandemic. So it's a working process. So I try to open my statements and just try to tell them that they have to eat better, they have to do exercise, they have to go outside. Just common sense things. And Dr. Victory, one of the things that you and I have seen is that, unfortunately, what I call the medical religion, and with all respect to all of our colleagues worldwide, we have been during medical school and residency and subspecialty, and we're so busy, we don't have time to question things. We don't have time to ask the right questions. We have been indoctrinated, Dr. Victory, and that's terrible for a beautiful profession of being a doctor and helping people, trying to get better, try to get better in terms of health, and sometimes we touch spiritual things and different aspects, but the indoctrination has been so tremendous that we lose the ability to have common sense, and everything it's about common sense. So we have to start bringing common sense to the medical world.
Right. Well, you are more magnanimous than I. Indoctrination is probably the nicest word. I say it the way we were lied to. We were lied to, unfortunately, in medical school. And the greatest existential crisis of my life was really coming to that realization that much of what we were taught in our training simply wasn't true. It was fed to us by the big pharma. Big pharma overwhelmingly controls many of our academic institutions. They certainly control the once storied medical journals like the Lancet and JAMA and BMJ, so that those publications are nothing more than the marketing arm for big pharma. So we need to take an ad break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about that and then get into what's happening with measles and what's reality and what's fiction with regard to measles. So we'll come back after the break.
Well, you've heard me praise Paleo Valley's grass-fed finished beef bone broth and the delicious meat sticks. I now want to turn it over to Paleo Valley founder and CEO, Autumn Smith, to tell you about her company's food philosophy.
I'm here to help create the products that make healthy food convenient in our modern world. The diet and the food you're consuming is absolutely related to your digestive health, to your mental health, to every aspect of your health. The devil's in the details here. And not only do we have to attend to every single ingredient, we have to support a system with whole foods. And so when we source a product, it's going to be organic, it's going to be tested for pesticides, and then it's going to be grass-fed and finished or pasture-raised. It's going to be raised on regenerative American farms.
The protein sticks that come in 8 varieties are likewise impeccably sourced and prepared.
And the fermentation process came about because there was an ingredient that I didn't like in meat sticks that's pretty widespread. It's called encapsulated citric acid, and it's derived from GMOs and then hydrogenated oil, and it just melts into the beef stick, and you don't have to label it. That's the thing. You can label it citric acid.
Make 2025 a year to cut out the chemicals and feed yourself correctly. Go to drdrew.com/paleovalley for 15% off your first order, 20% off when you subscribe. That is drdrew.com/paleovalley. If there was ever a time to be rationally ready, it is now. I urge you to consider getting one of the emergency kits from the Wellness Company, because TWC has 7 different kits that are customized for a variety of situations. Wouldn't be a bad idea to take a look at each, considering, say, what we've just been through in California with the fires. I was happy to have the field kit on hand, and the Contagion kit in particular is suited for what is being predicted to be the next outbreak. That would be the H1N5 or avian or bird flu. Of course, the same experts from the COVID era are freaking out about this potential pandemic, but don't panic. Just arm yourself with the meds you might need if this comes to pass. Contagion Emergency Kit contains ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, Tamiflu, and budesonide, an inhaler that is good for airway reactivity and tightness, as well as reducing viral replication in the airways. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off your purchase.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate of public health to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew. Welcome back. I'm thrilled to be joined here today with Dr. Alejandro Diaz, pediatric immunologist and allergist, and the chief of pediatric medicine at the Wellness Company. Looking at that ad, Dr. Diaz, from the Wellness Company that just rolled, I am really proud of the kits that the company has put together. They really empower people, to have on hand the sorts of things that they would need to manage many different medical emergencies. We've realized, I think, during the pandemic, at least I did, that people are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And if you give them things like antibiotics and antivirals and medications to treat burns and nausea and vomiting and those sorts of things, they won't just take them willy-nilly. They actually, but in order for them to be useful, they really have to have them in their possession before the crisis occurs. I know that we've got a new pediatric kit, the children's kit, which includes a lot of different things that you probably use on a regular basis. But I'm very proud of these kits that we've made available.
Well, I really think that the Wellness Company is doing an amazing job, starting with the amazing team that they, what I call the dream team, including yourself, obviously, Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Drew, Dr. Rish, Dr. Thorpe, great people, amazing doctors. And I think that's one of the greatest achievements, to have all of you together and especially the wellness, the kids wellness kit, that it includes EpiPen, dexamethasone, eardrops, antibiotics, antivirals, and things that we as parents and obviously as doctors, we use it all the time. And I think it's a fantastic tool. Amazing.
I agree with you. I agree. Right before the break, we were talking about the fact that we were misled, misguided, indoctrinated, lied to, whatever you want to say, during our extensive medical training. I think this is largely a result of the influence of big pharma and the tremendous amount of money that they wield certainly in Washington, the fact that they control so much of the advertising dollars. The United States is one of only 2 countries in the world that allows pharmaceutical advertising on television, New Zealand being the other. The amount of influence that they have, and therefore they influence what we were taught. So great segue into measles. Everybody knows, hopefully, that the crisis du jour now is the measles outbreak. We've had several, but I certainly was taught, and I assume you were as well, that the decrease in measles deaths and measles as a disease burden was the result of vaccines, of kids getting the MMR vaccine, and that's why measles isn't an issue anymore, and it's now the problem that people aren't getting vaccinated, and that's why we have this outbreak. So talk a little bit about that, the truth versus fiction.
Well, that's a very hot and interesting topic, Dr. Victory. So if we look at the last 100 years, so the mortality rate has been declining even before the licensing of the MMR vaccine, which was just about 1963. And it was just declining just before that. So really, to be honest, the vaccine had nothing to do with decreasing the mortality at all. That's proven facts, that's science. That's one fact. And then if we go through, the outbreaks that we used to have all the time, before 1963, like my parents, I grew up on the 70s. So my parents, my grandparents, great-grandparents, everybody, most of them, they have measles by the age of 18 years. Most of them. In the United States, in Mexico, everywhere in the world. It was a worldwide disease. Communicable disease, but, mortality rate very low in the last, let's say, 80 years. And then in 1963, they start with the new licensed vaccine, and then everything was okay until 1989. In 1989, we had, because this is important to understand, in 1989, we had the first important outbreak after the vaccine. And then we're talking about like 55,000 cases and unfortunately 123 deaths. So that is mortality rate of about 0.22%. If we take into account that during that time, only in the United States, there were just roughly about 55 million children below the ages of 15. The incidence rate to acquire the disease was 0.1%. So after those events, the Advisory Committee of Immunization Practices, the ACIP, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, they got together and they said, we have a lot of cases. This is going out of control. Why don't we start a second shot, a second dose? And because of that, if you see the percentages, if you see the epidemiology, they started with the second dose until now. So, and then we had the 1992 outbreak, the 2014 in Ohio outbreak, the 2015 in Disneyland, and then the 2017 in Minnesota. So there has been outbreaks, always very small outbreaks, but now they are bringing the narrative again. So people are starting to get scared because they don't know what to do. And it's hard. It's hard to it's hard to communicate this with patients, parents specifically, because they are so afraid right now because the media are communicating not very accurate data. So that's confusing a lot of people.
Precisely. So just to recap, what you said is precisely correct. And this is not your opinion or my opinion. This is the data that appears on the CDC website. The reality is, from 1900 to 1960, the death rate from measles dropped by 98%. It was so low. 3 years, and that was 3 years prior to the availability of the measles vaccine, which, as you said, rolled out in 1963. So it had dropped by 98%. Why? Because of better nutrition, better sanitation, clean water, better living conditions, all of the things that happened between 1900 and 1960. Prior, by the way, in the years prior to 1960, we had somewhere in the range of 400 to 500 deaths a year from measles. Tragic, but not anywhere near the number of deaths we have on an annual basis from, say, influenza or tuberculosis, or in the rest of the world, diarrheal diseases, those sorts of things. So it wasn't exactly a huge problem prior to 1960, but it had already dropped by 98% by the time the vaccine was rolled out. So now here we are. We had not had, we've got a quote outbreak right now. We've had 4 outbreaks so far this year in the United States. An outbreak is defined as more than 3 cases that are associated. And we've had a couple of measles deaths that have been reported. But you and I both know we don't have there's an awful lot we don't know about those measles cases, including the one child who died in Texas. Talk a little bit about that, what you know. I'll fill in any parts that I know about that death and whether or not you think it's significant.
Well, first of all, as a father, as a pediatrician and so on, any death of any children, it's a tragedy of any kind, if it's an accident, if it's a disease, infectious disease, or anything. So I have to be very cautious about that. But statistically, it's not sufficient. It's not significant in terms of numbers. So really, people, they don't have to be worried about that. If they have made their decision, because, to be completely honest about this is just the question to vaccinate or to not vaccinate. And that is the question that everybody's asking. There are a large group of people in different parts of the world that they have decided not to vaccinate their children for different reasons, whatever their reason is. Every family will think differently. But now they are they're shifting a little bit because of this madness of big media sending this message of, this is the end of the world. Everybody has to go and rush to get vaccinated, their kids, and so on and so forth. But if we see the numbers, bluntly and cold as the numbers are, I don't think there's sufficient data to change your behavior, basically.
No, I agree, and I agree with you. And by the way, I don't think either of us are, quote, anti-vaccine. I certainly, prior to COVID, was considered to be a vaccine zealot. I had written prolifically on the importance of vaccination programs. I certainly believe very differently now based on the actual data and what we know. When I was growing up in the 60s, you got between birth and age 18, depending on what state you lived in, you got anywhere between 6 and 8 vaccines in that 18-year period. That number is now up to 78. And that does not include the 6 recommended COVID shots. So that would bring it to 84. So, I am not an immunologist. You are. But I can certainly say as a physician that the human immune system was not meant to be flogged continually with immune challenge after immune challenge after immune challenge with these vaccines. And that's what we are doing. And I believe that it is being reflected in the disease processes that we are seeing, not only autism, but the massive increase in asthma and allergies, eczema, psoriasis, all of these autoimmune things, I think are likely related in one way or another to the fact that we are over vaccinating, and we have been led to believe that we can vaccinate our way to good health, as opposed to all of the other things that you and I, have been talking about. What I was referencing with regard to this child who died in Texas is that we don't even know that child died of measles. The child tested positive for measles, but it is unclear. It's my understanding that the child was admitted with RSV and was actually given the MMR, the measles vaccine, in the hospital when the child came in ill with RSV and pneumonia. Talk a little bit, kind of in as much lay terms as you can, what the MMR is and why that might have caused the child to either test positive for measles or to actually contract measles.
Yeah, well, first of all, and again, I'm terrible sorry for any child's death of any cause. And I will not to disrespect anybody. I am a father of four, and I love children as a pediatrician, as a human being, and it's a tragedy all the time. And so the data is that one child died in Texas, and then another patient died in New Mexico. But if we ask the question, what was the condition in terms of the immune system or any other comorbidities, we don't know. I don't think that information is available. We don't know that. And so and let me tell you my personal experience. So as you know, I've been practicing for over 32 years, and I have different specialties. And until this moment, Dr. Victory, I haven't seen not even a single case of measles ever in my life. And I've been trained in Europe and Mexico, working in the United States, everywhere, and I haven't seen it. So it's not that common. It's important to stress that out. It's important to mention to the public, to the audience. And so that's number one. Number two, they're not right now. There are not a lot of doctors who has a lot of experience with measles. So it's not easy to recognize it, even though, yes, we know it's a communicable disease, it's a viral illness, it's a febrile illness, going with coughing, with maculopapular rash, and running nose, coryza, conjunctivitis. We know that. We know that. Every doctor knows that. But it's hard to recognize it because there are so many overlapping signs and symptoms of so many other diseases that it's hard to make the correct diagnosis. My question will be, who did the diagnosis? What kind of technology from the lab point they did? And there's so many questions. So I will start with that introduction in terms of the measles. What do you think, Dr. Kelly?
Well, first of all, I think what you're saying is spot on, because you're putting it in perspective. Again, I agree. Any death is a tragedy, and my heart goes out to the parents, of that child. But we have to put in perspective as physicians. If you put your public health hat on, we have the reality of the disease burden is that every year, in a particularly bad influenza year, which we've had many of them, 1957, 69, 2003, 2009, 2018, and this is a particularly brisk year this year. We can have as many as 30 to 50,000 deaths from influenza in the United States. Okay, so you have to, I believe, put things in perspective so that people are prone to fear all the time. After they've been primed with what happened with COVID, people, as you said, have PTSD, and it isn't going to take much to push them over the edge. So we are obligated as honest physicians to put things in perspective. It doesn't mean you are minimizing the tragedy of the loss of a child, but you are saying, look, we have got to say what is really the real risk. I tell people, if you want to be afraid of something, Be afraid of drug-resistant tuberculosis. That's something you want to be afraid of. Okay.
Exactly. And Dr. Victor, I'm sorry to interrupt, but on top of that, I mean, there's a risk. There is a risk from us, you and I, or whoever, driving from our home to our job, driving our kids to the school. There's some risk. So there are risks on anything. So we just have to balance it out and just being very objective. I think this will be like the main message to everybody. But you're absolutely right. I agree with you 100%.
Yes. No, and I think it is, again, Dr. Harvey Risch, our colleague, who's an epidemiologist from Yale, I asked him the other day, I said, how many on average, how many deaths in the United States do we have per year as a result of complications from diabetes and from smoking and drug abuse? And it's over a million deaths a year from those things that are entirely preventable. Type 2 diabetes, smoking, drug abuse. So I'm talking about things, not cancers that you could say, other things, but things that are 100% preventable. And so I think we have to put things in perspective. Another thing I want to talk with you about and see what insights you have is when we talk about MMR, which is measles, mumps, rubella, that the combined vaccine. So the MMR vaccine that we give in the United States is not just for measles. It's measles, mumps, rubella combined.
Correct.
And
Correct.
as I intimated, I have concerns that our problem with vaccination isn't just the total number, but it's the frequency and the kind of how the intervals in which we give them. Japan, I understand, they outlawed the MMR, that combined vaccine, in 1993. They still make the individual components, measles, mumps, rubella, available, but not as the combined shot. Do you know much about that, or do you know what impact, what caused them to do that, and what has the impact been on their disease process?
Well, and I was just, as you know, I was recently in Japan speaking at the Japanese Parliament in Tokyo, and it was mostly about COVID and the COVID operation and everything. And then we did a huge march in Tokyo, and it was amazing. We met amazing physicians, and basically the reason behind that, it was just scientific data. They get rid of those, and they just they did exactly what you said, and this is again just trying to bring common sense to science. Common sense to science. Like, for example, what happened recently in Kansas with the tuberculosis outbreak. And I haven't heard anybody like, let's go rush immediately to go and get the vaccine and this and that. So everything, it's about perspective. Everything, it's about, at the end of the day, to be calm, to have the right elements to make smart decisions. From the medical standpoint, from the society standpoint, now that we have an amazing director of HHS, Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that I really think he's doing an amazing job. But, don't you think it's suspicious what's going on right now since he got in office? I think, everything ended up to be political.
Well, that's exactly right. I think that, you talked about the impact that COVID had on faith, family, and health. One of the things also that it did was tremendously undermine people's confidence in our profession and in public health, because it has all been politicized. I think there's no question that it isn't just coincidence that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gets in the office. All of a sudden, we're having this outbreak of measles that's being hyped up. We've got, concerns about bird flu. They're making sure that President Trump can't make good on his promise to bring egg prices down, because if you kill all the birds, turns out that egg prices will go up. And so, they are making sure of it. They being the people who are doing this unnecessary calling. So yes, I think it's highly political, and it's only platforms like this one and your efforts on things like your Substack and speaking out that we can try to return perspective, common sense, critical thinking, and those sorts of things to the public, because I think people don't know what to believe or who to trust. And all I can say is, look to the people who got it right during COVID. They're likely to lead you the right path during measles and bird flu. You've been posting a little bit on X recently on Twitter about things that are outside of the normal realm of just medicine, but about the tyrannical governments around the world. You posted recently about Romania, and I know you were in Romania, or it's my understanding speaking there. I think these things are related. They might not look to be related on the surface, but using health crises to control the population, using fear to control the population. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you for asking, Dr. Victory. Number one, I've been in Romania a couple of times. I'm in love with Romania. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people, and they're having a very hard time right now. You know, they cancel the presidential. I don't want to get very political, but I just want to mention what I think is going on. They just cancel the presidential elections. So Mr. Georgescu, Calin Georgescu, who was the runner-up, he was the number one on the first round of the elections, by far number one, and they just canceled it. And the other party, which is the AUR, the Alliance for Unity of Romanians, led by my good friend George Simeon, he's helping the Calin to try to, you know, bring them to conscience of not tyranny but democracy, you know, and that's happening. And like you said, everything is related. Everything is related. So the left the globalists are blocking the real democracy to do good for their people, and now they're suffering every day, each and every day, and I am sure that the agenda that includes tuberculosis, includes measles, includes everything that we are seeing worldwide. It's linked. Everything gets linked, and it just bring madness to the conscience of people. So they don't want them to make the right decisions. Basically, they want to mislead people.
No, I agree with you. I think there's so much propaganda. It's so hard to know what is true. And when you start using infectious disease, which is as a cudgel to control people's behavior, to control what they do, whether they work, whether they travel, whether they get together, it is really evil. It is the essence to me of evil. It's a very quick way to strip people of their civil liberties because people turn them over to you. It was so quick during COVID. I remember being so shocked at how quickly people were willing to get in line, to fall in line, to put that mask on, to stand 6 feet apart, even though it made no sense. And our own colleagues, people, you know, you and I sat next to in virology class are all of a sudden, you know, removing every other chair in their waiting room and all of this silliness. You know, our own profession kind of bought into it. We've got a few minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about that in terms of you have great insight. I think not only are you prescient in terms of what's coming next, but I think you have great insight perhaps because of your faith and your global experience in terms of our own profession and what drove them to buy into it. Because I would submit to you that none of this could have happened if it were not for the complicity of our own profession, people in medicine. If everyone had stood up like you and I did, if everyone had said the truth and said the emperor has no clothes, you know, if we had said the scary part, this wouldn't have happened. So what do you think has happened in medicine that has allowed our colleagues to buy into it?
That's a great question, Dr. Victory. That's an amazing question. Before I get into that, I would like to recommend you and your great audience an amazing book written by my good friend from Belgium, Matthias de Smet, The Psychology of Totalitarianism. That's an amazing book. And everybody who will read that book will understand exactly, you know, the art of manipulation, what happened during the COVID operation. And I strongly recommend everybody to read that book. So
I'm so glad you mentioned. In fact, hang on for. I'm so glad you mentioned that, and maybe Caleb can throw that up there. Dr. Matthias Desmet, I believe, has been on the show with Drew in the past. We certainly have quoted him commonly. He's the person who I first became familiar with, referencing mass formation psychosis and mass formation, that psychology. But I have not read that book cover to cover. I would like to, but I think, go with this line of the theory behind the totalitarianism and the tactics, and certainly it played into, I believe, what happened with our profession. But go on from there.
So that's it. Well, that's the book. Yeah, I recommend everybody to read that book. And by the way, my dear friend Matthias Desmet, he's an amazing person. I've been with him in Belgium a couple of times and in different venues in the world. He's an amazing person, and everybody should see his interview with Tucker Carlson. Amazing interview. So what's going on with the medical profession, unfortunately, worldwide? It's if you see the syllabus worldwide of the medical profession, it's exactly the same. It's based on disease. It's a disease-based profession, not on health. It's not related on health. So when we say about the healthcare system, I don't really understand that concept, because this is not a healthcare system. This is a sick care system. And we've been taught about that since day one of medical school, and the indoctrination, the level of indoctrination has been tremendous worldwide. And basically, you want to be part of the club, you're going to be wearing your white coat, you have to behave, and you have to do exactly what we tell you to do. And I mean, I would like to put it on simple words. That's as simple as I can put it. Obviously, I've been studying this extensively for many years and understanding, but that is in simple words, Dr. Victory.
No, I think you are right. And I've said that myself many, many times. We have a disease care system, not a healthcare system. It's my understanding that in ancient Greece, actually, people paid their physicians when they were well and stopped paying when they got sick, because it was a sign that you're not doing your job. We do the opposite. Doctors only make money, and hospitals certainly only make money when people are in their hospitals. And so we have an incentive to do to do things that are not necessarily in their best interest. Not you and I personally, but the big system. We know that 80% of all physicians are now employed by large hospital systems or hospital groups and insurance companies that don't necessarily have their best interests in mind. Where do you see, we've got a couple minutes left, and I know your patients are anxiously waiting for you to get back to clinic, so I feel obligated to let you go back to what you actually do expertly every day, which is care for pediatric patients. But in the last couple of minutes, talk a little bit about what you would like to see. We've got multiple competing crises. We got bird flu and the impact it's having. We've got measles. We've got Robert Kennedy Jr. trying to attend to some other things on his radar, some far bigger issues, like addressing the food system and those sorts of things. What would you like to see happen in the next, say, 12 months with regard to where we're going with health and human services, where we're going with healthcare in the United States?
Well, that's a very interesting question, but it's also a very tough question to answer. But I really think that Secretary Kennedy, he's doing a phenomenal job. I just pray that they let him do his job, that he can do his job, that Amen. He can deliver what he's in his heart. I cannot imagine the pressure that he's going through right now. I just can't imagine. I had the opportunity to talk with him once on a Zoom call, and I was impressed. I was impressed by the agility of his mind, the way he can remember names, and he's like a photographic memory.
Yes.
And then just during the pandemic, what happened with this book? I think I was one of the first people who got his book, and it's I don't call him a book like the real Anthony Fauci. It's a documentary. Yeah. It's a documentary. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. So if they let him do what he is fit to do, I think we're going to have a great health system. Things are going to change. The other members of the health system, I think they're fantastic. They're amazing, and this is what I call the dream team. So I'm hoping for the best. I really think they're 4 years ahead of us, that they're going to be amazing, and it's going to be a game changer. We're going to be seeing slowly but surely, and I think at the end of 4 years, things will change. That's my hope, and I will pray for that.
I share your hope, and I appreciate those sentiments. I think the world of Robert Kennedy Jr., I think that he is absolutely sincere in his efforts. I think he wants to expose a lot of the fraud and corruption. I think he wants to get us back to the basics, return us to where we focus on health, not disease. And that certainly starts with our food system. He has not, the terrible anti-vaxxer, crazy conspiracy theorists that they want to, you to believe that he is. I think he is genuine. I think he's brilliantly smart. He's got a great background. He's fought big pharma in the past. He will fight for kids. He will fight for informed consent. He will fight for autonomy in healthcare, the things that, the pillars of medical ethics upon which you and I trained and have based our practices. So with that, I thank you so much for taking time away from your patients. Thank your patients for me, for us, for taking the time away. There's never enough. I could go on for another hour, but I so appreciate you, and I hope you'll join me again soon.
Dr. Victory, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I would love to be back in your show.
Sounds great. Talk soon.
Thank you.
I think we've got, that was great. As I said, I could go on and on with Dr. Diaz. We've got so many things to talk about. He is remarkable. He's been, as I said, all over the world. He has spoken at the parliaments of many, many different countries. I never cease to be amazed. And whenever I talk to him, he's always saying, well, I just got back from Japan, or I just got back from Brazil, or I just got back from, he really has been tremendous, not only in his background and expertise in pediatrics, obviously, and allergy and immunology, but really his ability to understand the pressures and the focus, that the different things that these different countries are facing in their own realm. And certainly I appreciate his comments about what's happening in Romania, because I think this totalitarian movement is happening all around the world. Caleb, do we have the list of upcoming shows? I only know the one that I'm back for. I'm back on the 20th. That's the one that's on my calendar. But you've got a great lineup. Simone Gold's coming up on the 18th, and Tom Renz, one of my favorite people, Attorney Tom Renz. He's done remarkable work fighting for people who were injured during the COVID debacle, and then obviously Dr. Ram and is there with Sabine Hazan. So some great shows coming up. I know that I will be back with Drew, as I said, on the 20th. I think it's just the two of us. I don't think we have any other guests, and that's great, so that Drew and I will have a chance to catch up on air. Until then, thank you all. I appreciate this. And you know where to find me on Twitter. That's my only social media presence, is on Twitter at Dr. Kelly Victory. So you can find me there. Thanks.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.